All set? All right, I'd like to call the March 16th, 2023 EMS committee meeting to order. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Come on, Diane.
How are you?
Come on down, Diane.
On this side.
You're part of the committee. She's public.
Let her get in settled.
Let's actually.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. See what we can do with that. All right, we'll go through roll call real quickly here. Commissioner Kataya.
Here.
Commissioner Ziegler.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah.
Here.
Commissioner Torrey.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz-Pasito.
Here.
Commissioner Bly.
Here.
Perfect. You
Hello.
have the floor, sir.
All right, hello. Hello, Mr. Bly.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
I'm
All
at
right.
work, but I'm taking some time off, so.
Understandable. So we'll move on next to public participation. If there's anything from the public.
Nobody in
Yep. All right. Moving on. I know you just walked in, Scott, but just any NEMS issues or anything to bring up to the committee from NEMS?
Same old thing. So, no.
Okay. We'll move on to item 5, AMR report or comments. Got anything from AMR reps?
Nothing specific. We did submit our January reports, response to reports back in the beginning of February. We sent out. So
All right. We'll move on to item 6, any dispatch for police concerns? Anybody know of any issues?
Question. Currently, it's sporadic, but it happens more often than it doesn't happen. The public safety dispatchers at Newington aren't toning out 551. Whether it's that they're busy or they just forget or they have personal animus against using the volunteers, you'll hear the first ambulance go out and then they're calling AMR directly without toning as per written in the contract. It mainly happens on the weekends, but it has been happening in the evenings. Again, last year we asked from the police department for any papers, notes, writings, or SOPs, SOGs, or protocols as to how EMS is dispatched in this town, and we have received no replies back. I don't know if it's just they don't have enough personnel, they don't have enough time, but if it's required what they're supposed to do, they should be doing it. More often than none, you hear 550 go out and then a second call come on and AMR is signing on directly. You know, whether or not it's a personnel issue with NEMS or not, it's just for years, up until recently, it's the way it was done. 550, 551 was toned out. They waited a certain amount of time and then they passed the call. Now they're just passing the call.
Scott, any comment on
Scott,
that?
I think
still waiting for the chief's reports. It's been 3 or 4 months now. That if you go back in the minutes of this committee, it's been asked numerous times in the last year, what is their dispatch procedures?
this is from
We
Chief
still,
Clark,
none of us have seen it.
from Chief Clark, right?
That's who it was addressed to
Uh,
by this committee.
Are you still having issues with 551 not being dispatched, or? I mean,
It happened 4 times Saturday, happened 3 times
Bigger
Sunday.
issue we're having right now, and we got a call the other day, 3 to 4 minutes from when the paramedic gets dispatched till our tones go out.
Oh, yes, that,
But that's part of the whole waiting for what we get from dispatch.
for the EMD process.
Yeah.
Because they EMD it and then it comes back to you. correct?
Well, no, it
Well,
It doesn't.
yeah, part, depending on the call type, and what's going on, if once dispatch enters the basic information, it is the CAD to CAD link transfers it, and there might be a dispatch on the AMR side. Even though our dispatcher is still talking with the caller, if it's not gonna be an EMD transfer, if it's something a little more, where there's no EMD, there's no one at patient side.
Yeah, years ago, we asked them to do a simulcast, which would take care of this issue. The radio system is still in place. It's not feasible. Maybe once we get the new system in place, we'll be able to do a simultaneous dispatch. So when the
The
first
call that-
responders are done.
The call that you're referencing was PD dispatched.
Yes,
At what point was PD dispatched?
they were dispatched first. AMR arrived on scene with a paramedic. And then finally, they dispatched us.
Okay, so there was a several minute gap between PD dispatch
Oh, yeah.
and the tone.
And it happened.
Yeah, PD will normally get dispatched first because they don't have to cue tones or anything like that. They can just throw it out.
Which
over
is
the
why
PD.
we wanted to do the simulcast.
But I'm not
But
meaning,
that's with the new radio system. that
I'm not
may
meaning to
take
impugn
place.
any dispatchers, but it's specifically, you can tell the voices, you can tell when it happens, you can tell the individuals that are working when that happens. You know, aside with other issues of just some of the ways things are dispatched, you know.
I think what you need to do is go back to the minutes of when it was requested at this meeting.
But was that
Yeah,
request
follow-up.
officially forwarded? It's the real question. Do we have
I
any
don't know,
record of that?
You're the committee.
No, it was done in this committee, it was recorded, it was asked for them, I believe it was around June of last year that we asked for that. Because it was in anticipation of having to work on the contract and the emergency plan for the coming season. But again, nothing has come back. I mean, okay.
But I understand it's in the minutes. The question is, with requests like that, they were usually sent from the chairman. The question is, was that request officially sent to the police department?
I believe it was, I mean,
Well, maybe it's
who was chairman at the time?
Dan.
in Landy. If not, even at the
I
very
mean,
least. we should
unless
also-
Dan sent it to the town manager, the previous town manager, and it wasn't acted upon.
So why
I-
don't we do a second request to the chief,
Right.
directly to the
I
chief?
think the
Mhm.
process needs to be followed.
So,
It's just, it would be nice to know what the procedures are before we can impugn someone.
Correct.
But again, it is happening, as Chief Mangan can attest, on a regular basis where they're not toning out the second ambulance. Just for whatever reason. You know, I mean, I could get into other theories, whereas you have dispatchers making $105,000 a year when their base salary is 62, and it's a personnel problem.
so.
I don't know what salaries have to do with this.
Because if your base salary is 62,000 and someone's making 105 and you have three people making 105, they could hire another dispatcher and solve some of the personnel problems they have.
Well, there's
There's a budget
efforts-
that they have to
there's-
follow.
And there's efforts to hire.
No, I
and a
fully
hiring process
understand
that's
that.
been ongoing.
But you know, the constant for over the years has been, we don't have enough personnel. Our people
One of our
can't do
dispatchers
it.
did recently drop out due to battling brain cancer right now. So there's ongoing issues like that.
So,
I'm just, I understand people have issues. That's what my,
Yeah, and the
Line.
adding additional positions is something that's beyond the PD's control.
Well, I mean,
That has to get approved from
you could
higher
put
levels.
a hypothetical in there. Say AMR is not the contractor anymore. They're the ones providing the EMD. If no one's providing the EMD, who's going to do it? Because currently we're contracting for that service.
okay. So, obviously, there's concern over 551 calls and it not being toned out. So, does anybody, any ways to address this? Do you want to,
I
as a
think
committee, send a letter to the police chief requesting
Well,
reports?
It sounds like what we requested was
Probably
a
never
copy
done.
of dispatch policies related to E EMS.
Copies of dispatch policies. Okay.
And I'd narrow it to specific to EMS dispatch procedures.
So, I'll my opinion is that we could draft a letter, make sure that everybody approves of the letter and submit it to the chief of police requesting what we want, the copies of dispatch policies for EMS in the town of Newington specifically. And let's see what Chief Clark has to say, and if he submits the reports. If not, then we can address it another way. I do.
Reword it to meet national standards. It's all emergency medical dispatching, beginning with the first responder, R2, R5. You have to include all of those. Because any 911 call that is deemed by National Telecommunications and State Telecommunications as a medical emergency follows those plans. So to harp on just an ambulance isn't fair to the whole system.
I don't know what we said
So-
ambulance, we said EMS dispatch procedures.
The whole EMS system,
Use the terminology that's
Yeah.
in your lunch.
Yeah. national standard.
Because according to our charter, we cover everything from EMD until R5.
Correct.
So
You have to just be fair to everyone.
Okay. All right. Anything else under police and dispatch? All right, we'll move on to the 2023 EMS plan. I believe everybody has a copy of
2018.
the plan for 2018. Obviously, it's lengthy and there's quite a bit of information in here. I know that I did kind of put a bunch of stuff on the agenda for tonight. The next point is kind of the highlight of tonight that we want to talk about. My thought and my,
Everybody's looking like they got a copy.
Yeah, there's a stack
no,
of copies
yeah,
right
there's
over there.
another
I
thing.
had printed it mine. Mine has all the backup, all the different contracts.
So kind of my opinion and my or my stance on this, or how I feel on this. We all have copies now. I know a couple people might have had them from before. My thing would be to look them over the next couple weeks, and for our April meeting to pretty much just do a work session with the one item on the agenda for the EMS plan. Go through it together as a committee, make changes that we need to make if there's any additions, removals, get it set to go, get it typed up, and then if we can't approve it on that meeting, then we can approve it for the May meeting. If we have to make another work session, we could add work sessions in as needed, but that's kind of where my thought process is on it right now, unless anybody else has any.
you're gonna need at least, we can work on it as fast as we can, but once it goes to the state, there's one individual at OEMS who oversees every single one of these emergency plans and reviews them whenever they have to come in. One person, 169 towns. So it's gonna take them a while to approve it.
That's
Which
fine,
that
but
was,
we'll
that was
get it there.
reflected in the letter from the state,
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
and
why they give you a January 2023 deadline.
yeah.
right, and unfortunately, I wasn't involved at that point, so.
But the rest of this committee was aware of that.
Yeah, we attempted to do this back in last year, I think in April.
And that is, I'll be honest with you, that's my focus, and that was brought up to me when I was asked to step up and join the committee, and that's the first thing, one of the first things that we need to tackle before moving on to anything else. And like I said, I did put a kind of an agenda together for tonight. And then, like I said, my thought process was to get together in April, have that as a line item just by itself. At least between now and then, we can all have time to review it, make any, notations on what we'd want to change or what we want to say. And again, we could always make another second or third work session if we have to really iron it out. But I know, I saw the letter, I saw the date, but hopefully we can get this ironed out sooner than later. Any opinions?
Last time we talked about this, I presented a white paper written in 2017. Obviously, none of it was taken into account in that LEMC plan. So I've got it reprinted and I put into it 2 more. I'll submit it to the chairman if he would like to distribute this at the proper time. But it talks about response times and how what it does is kill citizens. It doesn't save lives. What saves lives is our ones getting on the scene and working with the public.
Okay. There-
Because the 1C plan that's in effect is very dangerous to the public and to the emergency services with contracts with this town. Because it's all based on racing to the scene, driving recklessly, and this town continues to authorize it.
Sure. Can we one more? Can-
One more.
okay, thank you. And the national trend is to be away from time response.
Oh, it has been for 10 years, but this town refuses to address it.
And I
But
will
what's
have to-
good is that other ambulance service providers saw that based on some of the reports that James has. Because they are specifically asking for that to be removed because it's dangerous. One of the reports, if you look in that handout, actually in the second page, it's highlighted that national standards and even lawsuits across the country, they lose them. And this town will remember how much money we spent going after AMR for late response times. And we spent probably more trying to defend that as this committee that's here than what the fines were levied. And if it goes to court, it's thrown out of court, as you'll read in these articles. So to waste your time spending all that in ink on this plan, the way it's written, is going to lose. You need to look at national standards and times. are
We haven't
not
started the
national
rewrite of this
standards.
yet.
Right.
All right. Thank you for the information, Scott, and we'll definitely have to keep that in mind, working on the document. Anything else under, or anything under the EMS plan?
Is there a Word document of this? Just because there's a couple like clerical things under the AMR sections that I could probably just submit to you guys.
So the one I gave.
Yeah, I have an email, so after the meeting, I'll get your email address, and I'll just forward it right to you. This way you can go through and then update it and then send it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be great, yeah, it's nice and easy.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. Number 8, the AMR contract extension. So we just got the AMR contract from James. They are looking to do an extension for 2 years. And are we looking to leave the contract as is for the 2 years, or?
That would be up to you. A request has been made to remove the penalty clause in exhibit 2, section 5. So it's on the last page of the document.
Yeah, and I could speak to that, the intent with that. So for the life of this agreement, you know, we provided really good service to the town. We haven't had any finable calls. We as an organization are just moving away from fines for response times. We certainly can share language about measures to be put in place if for some reason we fall below a, contracted, response times that's appropriate. We're not looking to get rid of the times per se. It was just the financial penalty that's attached to them. And we could share language with you if what we've done in other areas as far as that. So typically, in some contracts, we have, if performance is below the required percentage over, a 2 to 3 month period, then there'd be a written plan to correct that, et cetera. But for the life of this agreement, we haven't had any concerns with response times.
And has there, since this contract was put in, has there been any, James, has there been any fines issued or any issues with fining?
The fines were taken out of the contract with the town council part of this current contract.
Well, there's fines in this contract.
Right, but they had put it, said that they don't want to do fines because of the lawsuit. So they just totally didn't even think about it.
I can speak in
But
my,
it is there.
in my
It
tenure
is
as,
currently in the contract,
yeah,
whether they spoke to it or not. To my knowledge and speaking with Attorney Palomino, there hasn't been any issues since what we resolved previously.
yeah.
It was in 2018, I believe it was.
And I've been in this role as an ops manager since 2019, and I've never received a fine from the town to pay.
Any comments from any other committee members in regards to the AMR contract extension or any concerns as to the removing of the penalty part of it? None?
Just one question aside from
Why
the
would
penalty.
we remove it, just in case? Why would we remove it? Why wouldn't we just leave it in there?
That's a good question. I mean,
I mean, if there's no, if there hasn't been anything, but if we leave the penalty part in there, it's just to protect us.
Yeah, so, like I said, we're just moving away from that language in the agreements with the penalties. We're happy to replace that language with, paying a fine, or correcting the problem. We could replace language to say, all right, well, if there's a performance issue, which there hasn't been, we could provide, a written plan or we could share some examples of language that would, ensure that we're meeting the compliance going forward. I mean, the goal here is not to, remove the fines and then provide, less of the service that you're getting now. We're just.
Right, but
sliding away
the
from
call
fines.
times are coming from you directly, right?
The call time, you mean the
You're
report?
self-reporting your.
You're self-reporting the times. We're not getting them from the town.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there would be a difference if the call reporting came from the town and when the actual dispatch part happened.
Well,
If
so
there
we,
was-
contractually, we respond, our times
Didn't the
are
town
based.
didn't the town report before?
It was all manual entry. However, I
It was
do,
very time consuming and tedious.
I do have some.
But is there a
views
way
on
to change
though.
that?
Well, I mean, there's two ways if you're looking for a uninvolved third party. CMed always has times if the units sign on and they have proper times. I don't
I
know
mean, I'm not
how,
saying there's a problem
Yeah,
with
and
reporting.
in the past, we used to compare dispatch
But that
times
would
to
give you-
CMed times
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
AMR times.
Mhm.
And there is always discrepancies because you always have missed punches, you always have, time of that the dispatch punches their CAD,
Yep.
doesn't account for transfer EMD and generation of the AMR CAD, doesn't account for the ambulance.
Okay.
CMed doesn't have time of call, all they have is time of the first unit signing on.
Right.
So there's,
With the
Okay.
new
There's time.
CAD bridge that's up and running,
Mhm.
you would be able to get that data. I'm on for those that haven't been involved in EMS, national government is implementing what they call NEMSIS 3.5 reporting. And we have to the end of this year to get that straightened out. There's a few towns in Connecticut or services that use this program called Image Trend. It's a small users group, but the state epidemiologist has been working with all the vendors to get this in place because there's a lot of work at the state level. So we've been meeting with the state epidemiologist because we are one of, I think, 5 towns that use the current platform. And Rocky Hill and Newington have always been the guinea pigs for Image Trend anytime there were state or federal changes. Rocky Hill has theirs up and running. When you get into their case report, instead of starting a new case report, you can say import CAD. You click on import CAD, and NextGen sends the data right from their computer, which is the same
Mhm.
software that's being
The-
used right over the hill here.
the issue with the CAD to CAD link in that is that, the port over from AMR is
Yeah.
all free text in the CAD field and is
Yeah.
not populated as unit times and whatnot, as far as actual units assigned and times in our CAD is my understanding. It's informational, but it won't compute over to, you'd have to extrapolate that from the free text section within the CAD, and then manually enter times, so that won't actually, your
Our times would be.
NEM's crews times will be because they're punched
Which
as
will tell
units
you
by
Time of
dispatch.
911 call, it will tell you time of R1 call, it will tell you time of transfer to EMD, it will tell you time of R2 response, which is 550 tone outs. And it will basically show all that information.
Yep,
And that works, it's just that Newington system working with the IT group. We just need to get that working.
yep,
But the town of Rocky Hill has had that working for 2 years now.
And Rocky Hills encoded all of Aetna's ambulances numbers into their CAD
Into
system.
their
So
CAD
every
systems.
time an Aetna ambulance signs on, it automatically populates into the,
So
that-
AMR has done their
Oh, well,
job
so
to getting their bridge working. to
AMR ambulances
your-
are keyed into our next gen also, but
Correct.
that they have to be punched. It's not part of
It's not
it's not part of the CAD to
Yeah.
CAD bridge.
So just so I just want to clarify how we report our times. So it's from the time we receive the call, which is almost instantaneously now with the CAD link to when the unit arrives on scene. All of that's either by AVL or the time that the crew hits on scene. And if there's ever a concern about a specific response, we could provide the backup information as far as the time that the ambulance arrived from a GPS standpoint versus when the crew, signs out on scene or arrives. The thing with CMed and, the other areas is as, you were saying, the missed punches, right? There's a manual, dispatcher has to, punch the times. But as far as our reporting is from the time we receive the call to when the ambulance arrives or the unit arrives. And for each and any one of those, if there's ever a concern, we could provide even additional information as to the times.
So just to clarify on that, if there is a specific call that was brought up to the committee or to the, obviously the town manager or somebody, or to NEMS in regards to a call, that we can sit down and still say, okay, what happened on this call? What are your times?
Yeah, I've provided that a few times.
Yeah.
To Scott and Dan if necessary, but yeah, in those reports, right, the summary report that I provide the town has the response time compliance for that particular month, and it's broken out by priority 1 response, priority 2 responses. If there's any, exemptions such as overload or incorrect address, or those are, listed on there. And then there's a running list of all of the responses. So if there's ever a concern about a specific response, we could even dive in deeper to that particular call and provide additional information.
I can add just a little bit as far as concerns about penalties being in the policy, but we're not following the penalties. This opens ourselves up to, look at outside of the EMS portion, having this in a contract and not following it. And then somebody else comes on board that says they're gonna follow it. That leaves you for liability for discrimination, all kinds of other things. If it's in here and we're not choosing not to follow it, and somebody arbitrarily chooses yes to follow it.
Well, we have been following it, it's just that there hasn't been any breach
There
that required
Right.
fines.
They've
And
paid their fines in the
the
past.
previous fines, the town was following their side and submitting fines, they just weren't getting paid. And then there was confusion as to how all that went down and what was remedied for that was handled. But there was never a time where we were not levying fines based on the contract.
Right.
By completely eliminating section 5, I could see getting rid of the concept of fines, but still providing performance expectations.
Oh, absolutely, performance expectations.
So that you still have theoretically the concept of a breach of the contract if expectations are not met in a regular basis. So although there might not be fines levied, there's still something that would be a breach of the contract if for some reason all of a sudden performance standards were to drop.
Yeah, correct. It was not our intention to like not provide reports or any of that. We want to do what we're doing now, and provide the same service, if not better service, and just without the penalty piece. But we continue to provide monthly reports
Yeah, so I could envision getting rid of the concept of the actual penalties, but still listing performance expectations in line with how they've been in the past.
Gotta agree with that. Any other comments on that?
None of that, just a question. Financial obligations for this contract, is there a financial obligation for the R5 and basic life support services? And is there financial implications for EMD?
Well, the EMD is in this contract. You mean, is there a cost to the town for this
Yes.
agreement? There's no cost to the town for this specific agreement. We have a separate agreement directly with NEMS for the paramedic portion. But that's not this agreement here.
All right. And the EMD portion,
The EMD portion would remain the same.
but there is a financial, no?
No, it's in this agreement here, which is,
Okay.
there's no cost to the town.
All right. So is there a way that we can get a wordage into, like, I know you were saying you can change it. Can we get some type of a wordage into the bottom in regards to what,
Yeah, so I know the town attorney had reached out to us, that the best procedure would be to draft a new agreement with the different verbiage to the town attorney that would then be presented to this committee, or would this committee like to see it first?
We can have Attorney Collin, contact them, get that drafted up.
And then as far as performance standards are considered, I'm not saying that we have to stick to the exact ones listed, but it's a consideration that we have some sort of performance standard. I know we're trying to get away from response times, but that still provides us with an ambulance on scene. So whether we reword the response times as far as the concern for that, but there still should be some sort of performance standard that we don't have a 45-minute response for a, priority one call. That there has to be some way to word that still keeps us in line.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't, and that's not what we want either,
Yeah.
right? So we're not gonna, if we don't have an ambulance to respond, we're gonna utilize mutual aid like we have done. So even if you guys kept the times and all that verbiage exactly the same, that's, I think, was our intention, but certainly if we want to talk through that as other measures, I'm sure that's open to discussion.
okay, so James, you're gonna file for that.
Follow up with Attorney Collin in the morning.
Okay, and then you can reach out to.
Well, we've got the discussion, he'll be able to see the video and see what you guys are.
Okay. Anything else on the AMR contract?
Everything else remains the same. Termination so requires material breach, et cetera.
Nothing else was proposed to change.
I mean, even with the times, I mean, we're not having an issue as they're currently listed in the agreement, so.
Plus whether you vary it based off, but there's percentage based of meeting those times. I think the concept of those time requirements is not the idea of racing to the scene recklessly. It's creating a standard for an expectation that ambulances arrive on the scene, and that holds the contracted service to make sure they are keeping an ambulance available in town, that they're not relying on ambulances responding from multiple towns over.
Yeah, right,
and
exactly,
whatnot.
because
So,
we wouldn't be
yeah.
able to beat.
Yeah, so that as long as the times are reasonable, that show not an effort for reckless driving across the geographical area in Newington, it's still representative of the fact that there's expectation that ambulances do arrive when called.
Agreed?
Great.
Anything else? Thank you for your information.
No problem.
Public participation?
One in the room, you do have one in online as well.
Okay.
They haven't raised their hands, so if you wanted to, you could go.
Nothing, just here to watch.
Online?
Online, I don't have a hand raised at this time.
Okay.
If they are interested, they can use *9 to raise their hand or the Zoom application. Give it a minute.
And this is Robert Bly. I have no questions right now.
Is there someone besides Chairman Bly also?
Yes, yeah, there is one attendee. At this point, no hand raised at this time.
All right. And I did put it on there, something new from the other one, from the other agenda. Any committee members, comments, concerns? Any concerns with going through the April meeting and just taking care of the EMS plan?
I believe we still have a vacancy of a vice chairman position.
You,
Being that no one stepped up at the last meeting, if there would be someone interested in the secretary position, I would make myself available for the vice chairman position.
okay,
And I would be interested in the secretary position.
okay. So not being on the agenda, we could still vote on that tonight, correct?
Technically, you could vote by 2/3 measure to add that to the agenda and take a vote this evening if you chose to.
Okay,
It is a regular meeting, so.
all right. So Matt, you're willing to step down as secretary and run for the chairman, vice president,
Vice chairman.
or vice chairman?
I think we need to make a motion to allow for voting on the vice chairman position. So you need 2/3 vote for that.
Do I have a vote to vote on a vice chairman for the city?
You seconded?
She seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right, so do I have, Matt, you're officially stepping down as secretary?
Did you have the 2/3?
Huh?
We have the 2/3?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll step down as secretary.
Okay, so Matt has stepped down as secretary. Do I hear a nomination for a replacement secretary?
Nominate Diane Sarah.
Oh, wait. He stepped down as secretary. You're in the vice chairman vote at this time only.
Oh, so we got that one
Oh, I
vote.
thought that's what we
You're gonna
just
do
did.
that first. He
Okay.
stepped down as chairman. Now you're taking on the vice chairman vote. We'll bring up a motion again for the secretary one
Okay.
individually.
Okay, sorry about that.
Gotta pass first.
All right, so I have a nomination for vice chairman,
I'd like to nominate Matt Diaz-Fazito, for
second,
vice chair.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, what?
Right.
He has to accept the nomination first.
I will accept the nomination.
Any other nominations?
Any other nominations? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I have a comment. We now have the president of the board of directors of Newington EMS. I believe the treasurer of the board of directors of Newington EMS and a regular member of Newington EMS on this committee. Two of them are officers on this committee and two of them are officers on the board of directors of Newington EMS. That in itself has an appearance of a conflict of interest in everything that I've learned about conflicts of interest. This board recommends contracts. Newington EMS is a contractor. How can the officers of a contractor recommend contracts to the town council for the agency that they represent?
And that's exactly my concern too. It's just, to me, reeks ethics violation.
Okay,
In addition, a member of the town council is a member of the board of directors of Newington EMS, and that board ultimately approves contracts. Therefore, they would be approving the contract for their agency.
any other comments, discussion? All right.
There seems to be some type of confederation going on. I'm not sure what's happening, but for transparency, we also put our cards on the table and get to the work of doing the work for the public. The taxpayers deserve it better.
All right. Thank you, Don. All right,
My only comment on that is, did you have an issue when Dan working as a member?
This issue,
I'm just asking you,
this issue of conflict of interest has been going on for years. And it's never been acted upon. Everything that I've been taught, I have to take ethics class every year for one of my jobs, says you can't be on a board of an agency that does contracts with the agency that you work for. So if I work for a federal government contractor that does work for the federal government, I can't be on that board or I have to leave my federal job. So it speaks of ethics, everything that I learned at the state when I worked there. You can't be on a board that contracts with the state. I mean, I think it would filter down to the municipalities. You can't be on a board that contracts with a municipality. I'm not saying anything's going wrong. I'm just saying for transparency and then with the appearance of it and ethics, someone could have an issue with it. It could put the town in an actionable position. All I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Moving on. We have a nomination for secretary.
No,
Oh, no.
Making a motion
Oh,
to add it to the.
Sorry,
agenda.
that's right. Make a motion to nominate a new secretary. All in favor?
Did anyone make a motion?
Right.
No.
No.
Make the motion to move for a secretary vote this meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed?
Joke.
So
I
noted.
didn't hear what Rob said.
Bob, what'd you say?
Nothing, I'm here.
Don't worry.
All right.
I'm just writing my stuff.
Just make sure. All right,
I move to nominate Diane Sarah for secretary.
second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Acceptance.
I accept the nomination.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forget about that part all the time.
Keep me in line, don't worry.
I accept the nomination of secretary.
Okay, nomination accepted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so noted. Thank you guys for stepping up.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I believe the town has already addressed the issue of conflict of interest, but for transparency purposes, if you want to check with the town attorney and town on the legal matter regarding conflicts of interest, I think that would be in the best interest of the
Okay.
committee.
I will also follow up with the town attorney and town manager and make sure that everything is as is supposed to be. And if there's any issues, I will bring them forward.
Thank you.
Right. Any other committee member comments? Albert, any comments, concerns?
No, not at all.
All right. With that being said, next item is adjournment. So I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you guys for coming tonight. Appreciate it,
Thank you.
and we will see you at the April meeting. I will get an agenda.